Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to install Voultar's SNES RGB mod into a Super Nintendo Jr. Let's get right into it. I'm going to hop over to the bench and show you the tools that you're going to need. I found the tutorial on Retro RGB for how to install the RGB board, so go ahead and pull that up and you can read through it too. This is a good guide that will let you know how to do what I'll show you now. All right, looks like we're not going to need that many tools. First thing is obviously a soldering iron. So I have this Heiko soldering iron. Next, we're going to need some wire cutters, some side cutters. Going to need some ribbon cable, unless you ordered pre-cut cable from Voultar's website. He does offer a checkbox where you can have him send pre-cut wire to you, but if not, please go ahead and pick up some of this ribbon cable. It's really handy to have. Then we're going to need some of this Flux paste in a little tub. But we're also going to want a Flux pen. I use this No Clean Flux pen, pretty good. To strip the ribbon cables, we're going to use this ribbon cable stripper thingy, really helpful. Last but not least, we're probably going to need some solder braid, so that's helpful to have. And you're going to need solder, I forgot. You're going to need solder. I use this Kester leaded solder, this really thin Kester solder is what I like to use. When I ordered my RGB mod, I checked the box to have this additional capacitor sent. This is supposed to clean up some ghosting that supposedly happens, so we're gonna look up where to put that after. You're gonna need a game bit and a Phillips screwdriver, so I'm just gonna use my iFixit kit. Okay, let's open the console. Before I get started with the mod, I'm actually going to replace the caps. I'll leave a video in the description if you want to know how to do that. Go ahead and flip the console over. Now, Retro RGB's instructions mention to clip the leads really short on the capacitor legs that are poking through here, because the board that he has in his picture looks like it will conflict with those legs. However, Voultar's new mods have this part cut out of the side of the board, so you really don't have to worry about that. It fits nicely over those pins if you're gonna just kind of test fit it over there. The mod fits pretty well over those legs, so don't worry about cutting those. Put the mod over the pins. These are the pins for the multi-out here. These are the pins for that connector. I'm just gonna kind of do a test fit with the RGB mod chip. Just kind of line the pins up, and they should kind of just go over there. In this case, this console has a really nice fit. You know, there isn't a lot of solder that's sticking out of those pins, so you shouldn't have to worry about, you know, removing any solder first before this board fits in there. So I wouldn't worry about that, but it's always nice to check. You may have to get in there with solder braid and kind of clean those pins out a little bit. Just go ahead and do a dry fit. Next, we're gonna take my No Clean Flux pen and just kind of put a little bit of flux on the pins here that we're going to solder, basically that multi-out. Just a little bit is all you need. Then we're going to go ahead and drop that, the mod on the board here. This is some pretty easy soldering. Just keep in mind that you want this to kind of sit flat. So as you're soldering, maybe the first pin, just trying to keep the mod flat against the other board. So go ahead and put some solder on maybe one of the first pins here. Go ahead and put some solder in here. Just a little bit is all you're going to need. enough so that it's gonna stick up through the board here and make a nice little round, a nice little mound of solder. Just make sure that the board is flat, the mod chip is flat, and then keep going with each pin. Maybe pause a little bit at each pin and make sure that you are letting it. You don't want to keep too much heat on these pins, but you do want to make sure that the solder melts into the holes and you have a good connection here. If you get too much solder on one of these points, just go ahead and clean the tip of your soldering iron and apply a little bit more heat. You can usually just kind of pull the solder off of these joints if you apply too much with the soldering iron. Just keep in mind that these last 3 pins here actually don't have solder points, so you don't need to solder them. This kind of looks a little messy, but that's okay. The flux is on there. We'll clean that up with some isopropyl alcohol and a toothbrush after. Actually, let's just go ahead and do that right now. Got a nice, cool spray bottle with ISO in it. Let's give it a quick spritz. And hit it with our gross toothbrush. That looks better. Okay, next step is we're gonna go ahead and tin the 6 pads on the bottom here. Okay, now we're gonna need a 4 connector wire that's gonna head down to these vias down here. So go ahead and take your piece of your ribbon cable here and cut away a 4 wire section. Just cut, you know, a fair bit. You're not going to need a ton, but go ahead and cut this piece off. Right above C1 and R1 are a bunch of vias here. The pins that you want, the holes that you want to find are this guy, that guy, this guy, and that guy. First thing I'm going to do is strip and tin this wire. Right, those are stripped. Go ahead and dunk them in the flux here. Boop. And then we give them the old rin tin tin. That's not bad. These are a little long though, so I'm gonna cut these down. You don't really want much. I think you want probably 2 millimeters or so. That's a little better. I think to make this a little easier, I'm going to use my wire strippers and separate these wires a tiny bit, maybe just a millimeter or 2. Careful not to cut the wires you already tinned. Okay, that's good. Go ahead and flux the hole here. Just a little bit. You're gonna take the wire and gently, it's a little bit difficult to line these up here. But, and especially on camera. So let's go ahead and do our best to try to get these in there for you. You might need to angle this last guy down a tiny bit. Maybe it's easier to get the C-sync wire in. The point, these should be skinny enough where they should slide right into these holes. Cut a tiny bit more. Oh, all right. They're in. So you're gonna put these guys in dry, and then we're gonna tack it in place here. You got to keep all the wires in there, but you want to fold them down so that they stay in place here, but they're securely in the holes. Probably would be best to just do the first one with a little bit of solder on your tip. So let's try that. Okay, that's all right. Now very carefully and be patient here and get some solder on these points here. Don't go crazy because you could definitely melt the jacket of the wire and you don't want to do that. If you have to, add more flux. Not the best job in the world, but definitely want to look and make sure that you're not bridging any of these pieces together. Pretty sure that the red and green on mine are bridged, so take all the solder off your tip and just quickly try to make it really worse. Just make it worse. Don't get mad, put more flux. Okay, I think that's fixed. The key here is if you have a tiny little bridge here, don't get out the solder braid. Just put more flux on and clean your tip off. And the key is really that the solder wants to stick to this wick if it's hot and if there's flux, okay? So if you've got a little bridge here, you want to just kind of go in there quickly, put this tip into the bridge and drag backwards, and almost like a magnet or, you know, like a sponge kind of, the solder is going to want to flow onto the soldering iron with no solder on it. So that's really important to kind of fix these little small boo-boos, is knowing how the solder wants to flow onto this tip to clean up your bridges. All right, next thing we're going to do is get this guy situated where we want him, and cut and strip wire to the length here. And to make it really nice, you just kind of want to lay this guy out and then cut and strip to make sure that these wires kind of sit as flat as they can. And you can go a little bit long, it's fine. You can always strip some more wire off afterwards, but go ahead and cut a little long. Kind of annoying to use the wire strippers here, but be careful and strip them. Kind of make sure to hold on to the wire so that you don't pull the wire out the solder joints that you just did. If you want also, instead of this, you can use the strippers, separate the wires, and just strip them individually, which I think I'm going to do that. Right there. Just line up. Next. Probably should have said this earlier, but the pads here on the mod actually line up in order to the pads down here, or the holes down here, so you really don't have to do any crisscross or anything. You could probably do a little bit neater job, but you know what, as long as you've got good solder joints up here and down here, then you're in business. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to hook up S-Video. So we're going to need to run a wire from S-Video here to the video chip under here. So we're gonna have to take off the shield. Okay, now we're gonna do the Chroma and Luma for S-Video. Looking at Retro RGB's guide, he actually has the wires coming this way across the board. I'm referencing Voultar's video himself, and he goes the opposite way. He kind of goes across these chips and to the right or the left, the opposite way of what is shown in Retro RGB's guide. So I'm gonna follow Voultar, and here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take two wires from these two pads here, Y and C. We're gonna wrap them around here and down here into this channel, and there's gonna be two pads on the two legs of this chip here that we're going to solder to. All right, so bust out your ribbon cable and get some more ribbon. This is gonna be pretty long, so get a long piece. That should be good. We're gonna start on the top side. That might be a little bit easier to get the wire stripped on this side first. I just flipped it around the other way. That might be easier to see. All right, so before we do anything with the wire, let's take some flux, and we're gonna add flux to that bottom right pin. Or we're gonna add solder, I'm sorry. And the 5th pin over on the top, or the one right next to this dark green trace on the board there. So the one to the right of that leg. Should be good. Bottom right pin first. And then that top pin, you might need to use some tweezers. Sorry if this is hard to see. Again, you just want to inspect it, see if there's any bridging. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I think the wires are actually going to be reversed on the board. That is, if you just try to flatten out the wire from this chip around the corners of the board, the wires are going to be flip-flopped. So somewhere along the line here, and I did mine right here, you're going to flip the wires over so that, in my case, red is Y, which is going to line up with the top one, and brown is chroma. So that's the bottom one here. Go ahead and cut, and then separate and strip. Tin the wires, tack them down. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay, on Voultar's website, it says that this is for C11 on the bottom of the board, which is right there. That thing is small. All right, YOLO, I'm gonna try it. I don't think I would recommend this because this is a really tiny capacitor. I don't recommend you do this if this is your first mod. To remove the old capacitor first, we're gonna go ahead and add fresh solder to both sides. So that's C11. Then when you've got fresh solder, add some more solder to your tip and heat up both sides of it, and there you go, Bob's your uncle. I'm going to remove the solder using my solder braid. Then I'm going to re-tin the top one here. So it's got a little bit of solder on it. I'm gonna grab my X-Acto knife so I can open up this package here. I'm going to try not to lose it. Wow, okay. First challenge was actually getting it out of the package. Okay, I don't think these surface mount capacitors have a positive and a negative end. So hopefully that's true. The key to surface mount components is you have to learn the tools for this. So I'm actually going to, this is like extremely small. I'm going to actually pick this up with the tweezers. I'm going to try to lay it on the board where it's supposed to go, but try to get it as flat as I can. With the capacitor still in the tweezers, this is going to be like impossible to see on the thing. You just get the capacitor on the board, and then slowly push the capacitor and heat up that other pad at the same time. So that the capacitor is flat, and make the connection with the solder. So I know that's really hard to see on the camera. I'm sorry. All right, I'm not gonna fiddle around with that too much. I'm just gonna make sure that I don't bridge those two C11 pads. Now, once I'm happy enough with that other side to go ahead and, or that first side, I'm gonna go ahead and add solder to the opposite side. Probably a good idea to add more flux. Once you got it on there, I wouldn't be really worried about it coming off. Once you got both sides, I mean, on there. So you can go back and forth between the two sides and completely rip off. Okay, go ahead and attempt to add C11 back and drop C11 on the floor. I dropped the new one on the floor somewhere and that thing is gone. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to salvage the old C11 somehow. Hopefully this thing still works. So when you're working with these surface mount components, please work over a table or something so that you do not want to drop these things on the floor. I would just say skip doing C11 unless you really know what you're doing. Okay, old C11 is put back. I'm not gonna mess with that. I'll have to order some more of those replacement capacitors. Don't try this at home, kids. Go ahead and clean up my sad mistake. There's only one thing left to do now, and that is to test it out. Quick and dirty, I just kind of put the PCB back on the bottom shell there just to have something for it to sit on. And I got my OSSC hooked up over there and turned on, ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and see if the Super Nintendo RGB mod worked. Go ahead and turn it on. Got sync in the OSSC. Oh, there she blows. I went ahead and tested that system for a little while, played some games, and it seems pretty good. I'm actually going to be doing a de-jitter mod to that system too. You can check out how to do the de-jitter mod in my other Super Nintendo video. I'll put a link in the description. Yeah, I'm really kind of still bummed about that capacitor. Those things are really tiny. I'm used to a little bit bigger size surface mount components, but that's really brutal. I'll order some more of those capacitors, but that's really brutal, and I really don't recommend that for new people. Please just stick with the basic RGB mod. Soldering those surface mount capacitors reminds me of when I did that Neo Geo super gun. You have to solder a whole bunch of surface mount components, and you kind of get a certain technique down where you solder one pad of the two pads of the surface mount component, and then you slowly introduce the surface mount capacitor or whatever as level as you can and tack it into place at the same time so that it's like in the right position, but you know, it's soldered on one side, and then you let go and you solder the other side. Basically, you just don't want the capacitor to tombstone. Sometimes, you know, they'll have the ability, sometimes they'll just upend on you, and then you'll have to do the whole thing over again. So that takes a little bit of finesse, and yeah, but it's still kind of fun. That's pretty much it, guys. Like this video if you like it. Leave me a comment if you've tried the Super Nintendo, if you've tried any of the Super Nintendo mods before, or if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.